So welcome everyone to the talk number 6 on living the truth. And I'm calling this one Awakened Intelligence. So what I'd like to do here is really explore the different ways that intelligence manifests in our lives, and in particular, the way that intelligence kind of maybe a new kind of intelligence comes online when there's a realization of no self. The intelligence is always there, but it's used more often and relied upon more often as we see, the truth and the truth of this intelligence. So we continuously struggle, right, with life. That's something that we've been talking about in this group for some weeks. The egoic mind struggles with what is. It seems to be its main preoccupation is struggling, resisting the moment. And the struggle is really just a war within yourself. We struggle. I mean, and we cause ourselves suffering in that process. Take, for example, being in heavy traffic, driving the car. So it's not the traffic that causes you struggle. It's the mind that causes the struggle. It's really a division within. The mind perceives, something it shouldn't be this way, or it doesn't want this. And what does it do? It starts to struggle with the traffic, which of course rationally you can't change. You can't change the traffic. Even though you rationally know that, the mind will still struggle with this, with the traffic. It may even come up with some strategies, to alleviate what is, like changing lanes. Have you ever done that, where you're on a 3-lane highway and you're in one lane and you notice, wow, the middle lane's going really fast. I should get into that lane. And so you zip over to that lane. Of course, by the time you get in it, the traffic's all backed up in that lane, and there's another lane that's going. And so you bring this struggle to something that you can't change. You still try to do something to change it. Being okay, this is traffic, and letting go of the struggle. But the mind says, I must struggle with this traffic, even though rationally I know struggling will not change the traffic. And we can even make our spiritual search a struggle. Perhaps you've noticed that as well, and we have talked about that. Struggling to find the right teacher, or struggling to find just the right book, just the right teaching. And as I've said before, there is no right teaching or right teacher. It's all from within. It's all from your own innate intelligence that spiritual growth occurs. So we struggle with the internal and we struggle with the external. Internal experiences arise, we struggle. External events occur, we struggle. And it's all extremely irrational. And often accomplishes nothing, yet we do it anyway, right? There's a deep belief somewhere that only through struggle can we change ourselves or situations. This is the way to be happy, to better ourselves, to make situations more pleasant, to find happiness. And by struggle, I don't mean effort. Struggle is conflict. You can make great effort without conflict. Struggle is conflict, resistance with what is in the present moment, what's unfolding internally or in your surroundings. And have you noticed the things you struggle the most with don't seem to change? It's the whole what you resist persists saying. But have you really seen in your life how that's so true? And this is at an individual and a collective level. You really notice how maybe there's a trait that you have that you've a belief that this is something you don't want, and you've struggled with it for decades, and it just kind of hangs around and persists, and the struggle with it also persists. So awakening is really about being is not to be in conflict with anything. It's to be in complete harmony with what is. This is really what we're exploring when we're talking about living the truth. So how can we live our lives in complete harmony with what is arising and unfolding moment by moment? So there's no longer a demand that we have to feel good every minute of the day. We might not feel good many minutes of the day, but that's what's unfolding. We're not demanding that it be some other way. We're not demanding that things work out in a particular way. We may undertake actions towards some goals, but we're not demanding that particular outcomes must occur. As long as we demand that we must feel a particular way, or things must happen a particular way, we will suffer. And so this innate intelligence that I'm talking about is really seeing that, seeing how we create our own suffering. It's not external circumstances that create your suffering. I mean, this is what we sometimes tell ourselves, if I only had the perfect relationship, if I had the perfect job, the perfect boss, a great house, a Tesla, I don't know, whatever it might be. This is what would make me happy and would alleviate the suffering. So we keep chasing these things, and if you chase it because you want to feel good, you're trapped again and again and again. And you can't stop this whole process using the mind. The mind can't stop the mind. Have you noticed that? We've all tried it. We all have. Anybody that's in a spiritual group like this has tried to stop the mind using the mind. It only makes for a more divided and conflicted mind. An even more busy mind, if that's what you're struggling with. And when you start to meditate, you quickly realize this. This is when I do introductory meditation groups. This is the first thing people notice. The first thing they notice is, wow, the mind's way busy. It just sits and chatters. And then the second thing they'll notice some months later is the more I try to stop it, the worse it seems to get. And I came to this meditation class to calm my mind, and now I just notice how agitated it is, and how me trying to stop it is just making it worse. I've had people actually say, you've made my life worse than when I started studying with you. And of course, it's just, the mind has always been that active. It's simply that they're noticing it. But that noticing, that struggling with it, exacerbates it or creates suffering, is huge. It's huge. I remember I had one student who was just struggling so much with the busy mind, and I had said the instruction, what you resist persists, and how the struggle will exacerbate it. Finally, I just said, your practice for the next week, just for a week, I said, just really, really try as hard as you can to stop your mind. So I kind of sent them on a race, a sprint, rather than just slowly wearing themselves out. I thought maybe if I get them like speed skaters going, that they'll exhaust this struggle. And of course they came back. So the more, the more that instruction you gave me just exhausted me. I struggled in the struggle and I just suffered more and more. And I said, well, what happened? I just stopped. I stopped struggling with it. And then what happened? Well, things got a little more still and quiet. So once we meditate, we quickly discover this, how conflicted the mind is. But there's a quality of intelligence that is innate, that is always accessible, and that really comes online much more with the realization of truth. So we know there's many kinds of intelligences, right? I mean, I think growing up for me, it was all about IQ. You give IQ tests, and it's all about conceptual knowledge. And then you say, okay, here's a really intelligent human being. They've got a high IQ, which means they've learned a lot of, they've consumed and remembered a lot of facts and knowledge. And then we had Peter Savovy and John Mayer, and then later Daniel Goldberg talk about emotional intelligence. The ability to be in tune with others' feelings and emotions, and to discriminate and to discern how to use that information to guide one's actions and behavior. Then we had research on intuition, kind of gut feeling intelligence. This is really fascinating stuff. Well, Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink talked about this aspect of intelligence. This notion of a hunch or gut feeling, which is actually an actual physiological event. It's the basal ganglia. It's a primitive part of our body connected to our verbal cortex, communicating. It communicates this notion of a gut feeling. So there's these different kinds of intelligences. Some we utilize infrequently, and others we utilize more frequently. So I would say, for example, we utilize our conceptual intelligence much more. As a society, that's what's rewarded. So I'd like to talk more about an innate intelligence. You could also call it curiosity. This intelligence that notices, can notice and know at this kind of experiential level through our direct experience. So for example, again, we'll go back to meditation. When we meditate, we're told to be mindful or aware of what's arising, right? That's the usual instruction. So when we begin to meditate, we listen to that instruction and then we try to apply it. And it might or might not work for us. We might get so focused on doing it right that we're more focused on conceptual intelligence. What's the definition of mindfulness exactly? Maybe I don't quite have it right because it doesn't seem to be working for me, and just trying to get it right. I've heard many students say, I don't seem to well get this meditation thing quite right. I'm not getting it. So another kind of intelligence can come online, which I can also call deep curiosity. Might be a good pointing word for it. It's an innate intelligence or curiosity. And it takes us to what we don't know rather than to what we know. Like a 3-year-old. I'm not saying we all go back to being 3-year-olds, but just as an example, that just goes, why? Why? Why is it this? Just always going to what? To the not knowing. There's no self-consciousness about having to know. It's just, why? I can just imagine a conversation between a 3-year-old and Albert Einstein. So there's a great intelligence in this kind of curiosity and beginner's mind, this not knowing mind. So back to meditating. Are we simply implementing a set of instructions when we meditate, aiming for a particular outcome? Or are we engaging in the process with a sense of curiosity without any expectation of outcome? There's a question to ask when you're meditating. Is it, are you expecting something to happen? Like even in the one sitting, you're expecting to feel calm or at peace, blissful? Or in the longer term, are you expecting to become enlightened? Or are you simply just engaging with that, just being with what is, bringing this innate intelligence, this curious intelligence to what's happening, what's unfolding, without any expectation of what should or shouldn't happen. So it's not for a result, rather it's all about learning. Bringing curiosity, understanding. So we're not analyzing, but we're noticing. When you do this, you start to see the cause of your suffering. Start to see that you create your suffering, to put it directly. Start to realize you're not a victim of circumstance, that you're creating suffering. You start to see how suffering can also not occur in a shift. So as soon as we're comparing with some standard of how it should be or shouldn't be, we're comparing rather than seeing. We're judging rather than being present with. Not looking at the nature of our experience by bringing a curious intelligence to it. So I could, I could write down, I'll send you all an email about all the ways that we create suffering for ourselves. And you could read it, you could understand the words and understand what I'm saying. But that would have little impact, wouldn't it? We'd continue, the struggle would just continue. So there's something else that needs to occur. We have to see for ourselves directly how we're creating suffering. So I can't tell you, you can't read it in a book. You have to bring in curiosity and look for yourself using this innate intelligence. This is a topic that can't be talked about too much, because there's a real danger in these kinds of meditation groups and having a teacher like myself come here and talk about these spiritual path and the practices and so on. Because what can happen is the egoic mind can really, the mind that struggles, well, I'll just call it the egoic mind, can really take that and kind of take what it likes and reject what it doesn't like. You notice that? And then you never kind of bring your own authority, your own innate intelligence to bear on what's occurring. And that's all this practice is. In fact, for some of you that have been coming with me for a while, I just keep kind of pushing you in that direction. And I know many of you are doing this in your practice. I can tell it in your questions and in the way that you respond to different teachings, that you're bringing your own curiosity, this innate intelligence, to bear on what's arising in your life moment by moment. This is where the power lies. It's not in the teachings or the books. This intelligence has more power than any teacher, than any book, than any willpower that you might have. It's your innate intelligence, the basis of your inherent wisdom, your birthright of wisdom. So we bring this intelligence and see the patterns of mind that keep us stuck. We bring a real interest in what is happening moment by moment and shine the light of awareness on it over and over again. But through that, we see through the illusions. We see through the illusions and we see the truth. We see reality. So illusion only exists because it hasn't been subjected to this innate intelligence. It hasn't been intelligently investigated, you could say. And again, by investigated, I don't mean analysis. It's a different kind of investigation. So this intelligence just asks, oh, what is happening right now? What is happening right now in this moment? As the Buddha said, one who attends wisely attends to experience best. This is suffering. This is the cause of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. It's simply attending wisely to experience and seeing what causes suffering and what leads to the cessation of suffering. How we create suffering moment by moment. The Buddha had this term, Dhamma Vikaya, which we've talked about in the past, which is one of the 7 factors of enlightenment. I believe we talked about it when we talked about the 7 factors of enlightenment. And it usually gets translated as investigation. That's the most common translation, but it's really referring to this innate intelligence. Our capacity to know something based on observing direct experience. We like to frame it in those terms. Knowing, it's the capacity to know something based on observing our direct experience. So we use this innate intelligence to discern about our experience. So we can discern wholesome actions from unwholesome actions, and we can discern how we create suffering and what leads to the cessation of suffering. Really, those are kind of, that's really what we're doing in this whole process, is that kind of discernment. So in that way, we really have this wisdom. We kind of know what is conducive to inner health and ease, and what leads to dis-ease and disharmony. So you can see how this intelligence that I'm talking about is so crucial to this work that we're doing. So I'm not saying that the conceptual intelligence is not useful. Of course, it's a powerful and beautiful human capacity that you continue to call upon when one is living in harmony with the truth, as well as with emotional intelligence, perhaps something that we can cultivate and bring online, perhaps even more often. And I'm a big fan of gut feeling, this what we often call intuition. Our daughter just moved out east to New Brunswick, and she's in the process of buying a house. They were in Vancouver saving up for a house, and of course that was unattainable. So they managed to get transferred from the most expensive housing market to probably the least expensive. So they're all excited, and they bought this house. And of course, there are multiple offers, even in rural. I mean, it's rural. It's 6 minutes from Sackville, New Brunswick, which is, Sackville's rural enough, but this is outside of Sackville. But there were still multiple offers on the house. And they really loved the house. It's in the country. It's like built in the 1860s. And that's what they wanted, an old house in the country, not nature all around them. But they couldn't decide whether to increase their initial offer. They just couldn't. They thought about it. We don't know what to do. They commonly use the word, we've got paralysis through analysis. So I brought that up. I said, you bring up this idea of paralysis through analysis. Is that maybe something that's happening? And she kind of went, yeah, that's what's happening for sure. And so she said, what do you mean when you tell people to meditate on something? Could I meditate on this? I said, yeah, absolutely, most certainly you can meditate on this. And what she was really asking is there another kind of intelligence that I can bring to this? Right? I've done the conceptual. She's very intelligent in terms of, she got lots of knowledge and lots of education, scientist and all that. And of course, so she calls upon that first. But is there another kind of intelligence? I said, well, just pose, what's the question? And just kind of pose it, and then don't try to think about it. Just sit in stillness with that question, just kind of hanging in awareness, and just see what arises. Don't expect anything to happen. Just kind of, pose the question and let it just rest. Rest in that awareness, and see what's true from a deeper intelligence. What might arise is a gut feeling, or what might arise is just a deeper truth. So they decided to increase their offer. So analysis had told her that, I don't want to overpay, and if we put another, it could be too much. And But when she rested with it, it was, we love this house. We're going to live here for a long time. So what's, $5,000 going to mean over the next 20 years? And that was kind of what just kind of, it's just going with another aspect of intelligence. Not exactly what I'm talking about when I'm saying bringing curiosity, but it is bringing another way of asking. So this innate intelligence that I'm speaking of is really a come and see for yourself attitude that the Buddha so often spoke about, right? It's don't believe my teachings, come and investigate for yourself, come see for yourself. And so this is, it's a come and see for yourself attitude. The willingness to just bring curiosity and a willingness not to judge what's arising moment by moment. It's an innate curiosity. And this runs counter to the egoic mind, the mind that struggles. It runs counter to that because the egoic mind wants simple answers, right? Often just tell me what to do. It's just tell me the way it is. Tell me how to find happiness. What's the simplest way to find happiness? So it really responds to these simple impulses for happiness and the pleasant. Of course, we need these instincts. We've talked about that here. We need the instincts of the egoic mind. It keeps you from, as one person said at a previous session, it keeps us from jumping in front of cars, or it gets us to jump out of the way of a car, keeps us from jumping into fires. Right? The mother mind could go, oh, that's so beautiful. Look, it's all orange and nice and warm, and just jump into it. Well, the egoic mind is what knows not to jump into fires or in front of cars. But we also need to connect with a deeper intelligence. So we need our egoic intelligence. We need all that, of course. It's really a lot of our impulses for survival. But we connect with this deeper intelligence, and you'll find it, or you've found that it really comes online when there's an awakening to the truth of no self, and seeing the truth of how we create suffering for ourselves through this belief in an illusory self that can be in control of and behind what's happening in our lives. So I'll leave it there and open it up for any questions or comments about this talk or about anything else that's coming up in people's practice.
I just want to maybe a couple of comments. This series is it's really so much stuff in it. I really am getting so much out of it. I guess one I'll make the comment first. I've been thinking lately, well, when you were talking about the meditation there, about what the words you used were like, well, when you're meditating, there's not really any goal. You're just bringing curiosity without any expectations. And I thought of, well, you want to be a skilled meditator, but actually in order to be a skilled meditator, you have to be completely unskillful. You just have to let go entirely and actually let go of the letting go. And I thought that was like, kind of an interesting way to look at it. It's like that's what's so amazing about this practice, is that, you know, if we want to be skillful, the only way we can truly be skillful is by being completely unskillful and just letting ourselves go and just be with the direct experience. It's so amazing. You don't have to do anything. It's just, you just let go. The other thing I just wanted to say was, when you were talking about we actually create all of our own suffering. And so I thought, like, okay, I create my own suffering. But the idea of there's also the idea that there's no self. There's no self, so I can't really say it's me creating my own suffering. It's, I guess, I was, I'm thinking like it's the stuff. I mean, these misconceptions are and my ability to appreciate there's no self. Anyways, I'm wondering if you could comment on that, because, you know, my misconception, I feel like my, grasping onto thoughts, a big thing I think is craving to bring meaning to everything. We always have to make this great meaning out of everything in life, but really, that creates a lot of suffering, needing to do that. So I'm just wondering if you could just comment on how that you bring the concept of the self and there being no self into the idea that I create my own suffering.
First, on your comment, one teacher of mine said their spiritual path was a path of failure, and that's why truth was realized. So it's being okay with that, and being just a continuous path of failure, and noticing, the not getting what one wants is all part of the process. In terms of the self, what causes suffering is identification with an illusory self. So it's the belief that there is a self that's in control of and can control what's happening in our lives, what's going to happen in our lives. So that's really what. So it's seeing that through investigation, or this innate intelligence and curiosity, that's what is causing the suffering. So I use the words like yourself just to point at something, right? This mind body. It'd be awkward for me to say, you see how your identification with the illusory self creates suffering for this apparent mind body. But that's what I'm saying. But if I said that, I might lose a few people, and it's not doesn't kind of flow off the tongue. But you see how you create suffering for yourself. Well, there's a lot of conceptual labels there that are not true. In fact, even the second statement had conceptual labels that aren't true. In fact, anything I say is not true, because words can only speak in dualities, and truth is non-dual. So yeah, there's layers of ways of speaking that I could speak that are closer to the truth. And of course, saying you create suffering for yourself is quite a few layers up in terms of possible labels that one could use. That's why this is so hard to teach. It's, and the old saying, don't mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon. I'm simply pointing to truth. So don't take all the words that I'm using to point at the truth to be the truth. They're just pointers. I'm just kind of pointing. and then it's up to your practice. That's why we call it practice, which is exercising this innate intelligence, this capacity that's inherent. Again, it's not something you have to create, or I give you, or you get out of a book. It's just inherent. I'm just pointing how you can utilize that inherent capacity and see the truth for yourself. Yeah, but to answer your question, the labels, the more you try to, I tried to actually write a talk. I was going to say, okay, I'm going to write this talk. I'm going to be as close to the truth as I can. And then I kind of looked at the talk and thought, nobody's going to listen more than 5 minutes of this. Well, hardly anybody. Most people will just kind of, just it was just like a dance of words. That, yeah. So that's how I would respond to that. Excellent question. Thanks, Jason.
I just want to say, oh, you're welcome. I just want to say the talk was a really good talk, but also that means it was also a bad one too. So.
Yeah. Yeah, if the egoic mind enjoys a talk, it's a really bad talk. It could be a really, but sometimes at a retreat, that's, I kind of look around the room and I think, well, people are struggling, maybe the most compassionate thing to do right now is entertain the egoic minds a little bit. Just let them take the foot off the gas for half an hour and just tell some funny stories and just, it's part of the process, right? And the egos love this. You can see the smiles and people just, it's the load, because they've been, struggling, trying to meditate. This is more, not people that have been at it for a long time, but more newcomers to the practice.
So, Stephen, I had a bit of a question about when you talked about effort versus struggle. You made a point to differentiate when, as we go through our lives, effort is can be helpful, but struggle is not. And then you talked about bringing investigation and curiosity to explore, when they're suffering, what are the causes of suffering, and bring wise sort of insight to how to maybe eliminate causes of suffering. So is there a connection there? Is that the effort that you're talking about?
Yeah, that's the kind of effort that I'm pointing to, is this just this effortless curiosity as a form of effort. That makes sense. Because it's innate, so it's not like you have to. But it takes some intention or some effort to bring that about. So you hear this talk, and then I understand this at a conceptual level. Now let's see if I'll apply this in my meditation and during my daily life. So that will take some kind of effort, some kind of, the effort might not, effort's a funny word, right? Because we often link it with personal effort, and which the ego will latch on to, the egoic effort. So it's more of a kind of wise effort, or what is, in Zen they call it effortless effort. Which really the word, by saying effortless effort, you're simply taking personal will or egoic will out of it, right? That's all that word's pointing to. It's not egoic or personal will. It's simply innate, an allowing and opening, allowing innate intelligence to just see. So the seeing becomes the doing, and in seeing takes some kind of effort, you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why it's struggle, of course, is personal will, just wanting things to be different. That's, so that's why I differentiated between effort and struggle. I really like the word struggle, as you know, just to kind of point to, what the Buddha was calling clinging and craving. Craving is just wanting to get rid of the unpleasant and get more of the pleasant. Well, I use the word struggle to capture both sides of that that struggle, of that activity. Yeah.
So just on the topic of the no self, I think I've progressed quite a ways in, the concept of not being my body. It's changed over these many years, and not being my mind. But I still, and I mean, this is probably just useless because it's intellectual, but I still struggle with the idea that my awareness is related to a different place and time than anybody else's. So in that way, I am connected to this body and this mind. It's different from the experience that anybody else will have, because this is the place that I inhabit. So I come up against that all the time. Perhaps you could comment on it.
I would need some more clarification on the question. Can you say what you come up against? You gave me one sentence there, and I just to flesh it out a little more.
Yeah. So I'm really getting a real gut sense of I'm not my body and I'm not my thoughts, so trying to get this idea of the non-self, but then the place and time that, like, my awareness is set in this particular, or goes along with this particular body and this particular mind, and it's different from anybody else's. So to me, in a way, that kind of makes me a self that's different from everybody else's self. Does that clarify the question, or?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So you're unfolding as a unique individual. So you're part of nature unfolding, like a tree. If you look in the forest, you'll see all these different trees that are unfolding. The little seed, that acorn or whatever it might be, goes into the ground. That contains the entire tree it unfolds as a different tree, and each tree is different. One branch will go this way, some are crooked, some are, and so each tree is unique, but they're all part of nature unfolding. And human beings were the same way. We're all we're unfolding in unique ways. And we're also one with of part of nature unfolding. And that would be when we see no self, we see at the same time, we see unity with everything. And that's where the terms like oneness come about, and Thich Nhat Hanh's phrase, interbeing, and these kinds of concepts that point to this notion of interconnection that you're talking about. So to say that maybe this will be helpful. You're not, the self is illusionary, but the fact that you're a unique individual expressing life is not illusionary, right? There's a unique unfolding that's occurring. So once you see that, you no longer struggle with it. It's like a tree struggling with a branch that's going to grow up towards the sun. Tree goes, oh, I don't want that branch to grow that way. It would look more beautiful if all my branches grew out equally and were even. Or if I looked like that tree over there, that tree looks so beautiful, I want to look like that tree. And so you start to struggle with what is, of course, trees don't do that, but if they could, but humans do, right? We can do that. We could say, oh, I don't like the way that I'm naturally unfolding. I want to unfold like that person, or I want to unfold in this way. Arguing with the past, struggling with nature unfolding. So is that helpful? I mean, we're not denying our unique individuality. I know it seems like a paradox or a contradiction even, that there's no self, but you're a unique individual at the same time.
Yes, it is very helpful. And the other thing that comes to mind too is that we're not the only individuals that are unfolding in our particular bodies. If we think about it, there are myriad different species of bacteria, mites, so we're connected with other life forms just inside of our own body. So yeah, I guess, and if you're talking about the trees, there's been a lot of study recently about how trees are very much interconnected through the fungi that grow in the forest soils. So yeah, so that kind of all fits with those ideas too. Yeah. So thank you very much.
And so the practice is to actually, using our innate intelligence, see interbeing or interconnection, not to just hear it, but to actually experience it, to realize it. And this is why, many teachers will say that compassion naturally arises from wisdom. Once you see no self, the interconnection, the realization of interconnection naturally arises, and then you wouldn't harm another human being or any sentient being, anything, any more than you would, harm, you hit your finger with a hammer or something. It'd just be, because we're all one, it'd be like harming oneself. So that's so that's embodying the realization. That's something we could also talk about in a future session, is part of living the truth is embodying unity, embodying oneness or interconnection in the way that we live. So to be in harmony with truth would be to embody unity. But seeing it. So seeing no self is very much connected to seeing unity in my experience, and from what I've seen, they very much are very much intertwined together. But we could explore that. You know, what does embodying unity look like in our lives? Yeah.
Maureen's question just raises all kinds of issues for me that are just always ongoing about the nature of awareness. And I am getting on the no self side that, which I understand to mean that there's sort of nothing independent that's permanent. So our thoughts aren't permanent, our body's not permanent, and so forth. So there's nothing solid there that could possibly be a separate self. But then awareness sometimes gets treated differently as being the one thing that's different, as being the one thing that's permanent. And I'm still not sure if awareness, consciousness are the same thing. But you had talked before about Ajahn Sumedho surmising that, speculating that maybe consciousness carries on after death. So following up a bit on Maureen's comments about awareness feels like it's, could be seen as coming out of the body, or maybe not. It still does feel like a separate awareness, but maybe that's an illusion and it's really part of a broader consciousness. I don't know if there's any answers to this, but it certainly raises all those issues. And I know it's kind of intellectual, but I can't help pursuing it. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts about sort of the issue of awareness and consciousness apart from everything else.
Yeah, we could revisit that one. I guess we did that in one of the last sessions on experiencing no self. We looked at awareness and consciousness. So you'll hear many, and of course I can't answer that question in the 4 minutes that I have left, but we could again do a session on awareness and living the truth. So awareness, it's a interesting one, because we teach, and you'll hear many teachers talk about, resting as awareness. And just awareness is the background from which is, or the context from which all experience arises, and it's always there as the background, from which a body sensation arises, a thought, a feeling, and awareness is that background from which it arises and can notice that it's arising. And this teaching gets you many, many steps closer to not self, because it's now putting you in the position of more of a witness of kind of almost like a third party witness of experience. So you're kind of not as entangled in it. But that is still a stepping stone. It's a provisional teaching. It's a stepping stone. And then, I think the very last or second last session on experiencing no self, we talked about you are also not awareness. And of course, I remember seeing some of your faces, because for some of you, it's been years where I've been talking about resting as awareness, and It's your true self is awareness that is that which is aware and conscious of what's arising. It's still a stepping stone. It's a way of pointing to the truth, towards the truth, but not a definitive teaching. So you you are not awareness any more than you are your thoughts. Now, when Ajahn Sumedho talks about, consciousness, he talks about it in a unique way, as that which, and it's very similar to how the Advaita Vedanta teachers talk about consciousness as that being which links us all, and consciousness being primary over matter, as opposed to how we think about it in our Western more materialist society, as matter being primary over consciousness. Now, as you said, you're right, Alan, it's a very intellectual conversation at that point, right? But once you actually start to feel and experience no self, then that kind of statement doesn't actually feel all that intellectual. It just starts to feel like, yeah, really, that's the reality. How could it be any other way? Like, how could it be the upside down way? it starts to, things kind of fall into place. Things that you've heard start to make sense, even though they were kind of heard and understood in an intellectual way, start to make sense in a more direct and felt way. So those questions, I used to say to you, you used to get some pushback from me on the intellectual questions, but of course there's been shifts that have occurred. So those intellectual questions can be kind of entertained in a different way and held in a different way. I don't get the sense that it's in an egoic mind, it must know. It's kind of this curiosity. It's kind of looking at those big, reality itself. Because truth is about not just knowing the truth of our true nature, but the true nature of everything, of existence. So it's a much deeper, the questions get deeper and deeper as the realizations unfold. So I thank you all for coming. And